They had been told American armor was inferior, thin steel, open turrets, easy kills. In the autumn of 1944, German Panzer crews in Lorraine rolled forward with confidence forged in Poland, France, and the vast plains of Russia. Inside their Panthers and Tigers machines wrapped in 80 to 150 millimeters of hardened steel, they believed they owned the battlefield. Their long 75 millimeters and 88 millimeters guns could punch through Allied tanks at distances where return fire was useless, range was power, thickness was survival. That equation had carried them across a continent. Then the fog came. It settled low over the fields near Arracourt, choking visibility down to mere yards. Engines rumbled unseen. Tracks scraped across wet earth. German commanders expected American Shermans to appear head-on, trading shot for shot in predictable armored duels. Instead, something else struck. A muzzle flash erupted from a hedgerow. A Panther's flank detonated before its turret could even begin to traverse. Another explosion followed from a different angle, closer this time. Impossibly fast. Radio chatter filled with confusion. From where? One gunner demanded. No answer came before another tank burned. The crews inside those Panzers were facing a vehicle they did not yet understand, the M18 Hellcat. It weighed barely half as much as the tanks it hunted. Its frontal armor was so thin that rifle fire at close range could penetrate it. Its turret was open to the sky, exposing men to shrapnel, rain, and death. By every traditional European doctrine, it should have been annihilated in minutes. Yet German gunners found themselves swinging heavy turrets toward shadows that were already gone. Their optics searched for silhouettes that never remained still long enough to confirm. They were trained for long-range dominance, for deliberate engagements where armor thickness decided survival. But the Hellcat did not stay to trade blows. It appeared from mist and tree line, fired its 76 millimeters gun into vulnerable side armor, then vanished at speeds no Panther or Tiger could match. 50 miles per hour on roads, faster than any tracked armored vehicle on the battlefield. By the time German commanders identified the threat, it had already relocated. For the first time in years, Germany's heaviest tanks were not dictating the engagement. They were reacting, and reaction in armored warfare is the first step toward defeat. German intelligence officers believed they had already solved the Hellcat problem on paper. Captured reports, factory estimates, aerial reconnaissance, everything pointed to the same conclusion. The vehicle was light, dangerously light. Its hull armor measured barely half an inch at the front. Its turret was open. Its silhouette was tall. Against a Panther's high-velocity gun or a Tiger's 88 millimeters cannon, it would not survive a single hit. To German doctrine, the equation was simple. Armor wins tank battles. Always had. Always would. What they did not see was the mind that designed the machine. Years earlier, as Europe fell to blitzkrieg, an American officer named Andrew Davis Bruce studied German armored warfare with a different lens. A veteran of the First World War, Bruce had seen what machine guns and artillery did to exposed soldiers. He understood something many tank officers resisted accepting: survival did not always come from absorbing fire. Sometimes it came from never being there when the fire arrived. His proposal shocked traditionalists. Tanks, Bruce argued, should not waste themselves fighting other tanks. Their job was exploitation, breakthrough, maneuver, collapse. Anti-tank combat required a different predator entirely. A force held in reserve, unleashed only when enemy armor appeared, fast enough to intercept, mobile enough to flank, aggressive enough to strike first. Speed, not armor, would be the shield. The doctrine he helped build, championed by General Leslie McNair and approved by Army Chief George Marshall, formalized this radical thinking. Tank destroyer units would seek, strike, and destroy. They would not duel. They would ambush. The weapon built for the doctrine emerged from an unlikely place, a Buick Automotive Design Division in Flint, Michigan. Engineers more familiar with civilian road performance than battlefield survival created a machine powered by a radial aircraft engine. It used torsion bar suspension for cross-country speed. and one of the first automatic transmissions ever placed in an armored vehicle. The result was the T-70 prototype, later standardized as the M18 Hellcat. It was governed at 55 miles per hour. No German tank could come close. It could redeploy sectors before Panzers even completed their approach march. It could fire, reverse, pivot, and relocate before enemy gunners recalculated range. German analysts saw vulnerability. American planners saw asymmetry. The Hellcat did not need to survive a hit. It was designed so the hit would never come. The battlefield was supposed to favor the Panthers. That had always been the assumption. German armored doctrine relied on visibility, range, and frontal dominance. A Panther's long 75mm gun could destroy light armor from over 2,000 meters. Its sloped glacis plate could shrug off most return fire in open terrain. It was a predator without equal. But at Arracourt in September 1944, the battlefield itself betrayed them. A dense fog rolled across the Moselle Valley, swallowing hills, roads, and entire armored columns. Visibility dropped to less than 30 feet in places. Range-finding optics became useless. Gun sights saw only shifting gray walls. The advantage Germany had engineered into its tanks' long range. Lethality evaporated overnight. For the crews of the M18 Hellcat, these were perfect hunting conditions. Lieutenant Edwin Leeper's platoon advanced cautiously through the mist, engines throttled low, commanders standing exposed in open turrets to hear what they could not see. Then suddenly a shape materialized, a Panther, barely 30 feet away, its gun still searching for targets beyond the fog. Sergeant Stacy fired first. The Hellcat's 76mm gun roared. The round slammed into the Panther's flank and ignited ammunition inside. The German tank exploded before its turret completed its turn. A second Panzer emerged, confused, attempting to identify the threat. Stacy fired again. Another kill. There was no time for the Germans to react. A third Panther managed to return fire, its shell tearing into Stacy's Hellcat and wounding his crew, yet even damaged. The lighter vehicle accelerated out of the kill zone. Under its own power, something a heavier tank might never have managed. Another Hellcat slid into position and destroyed the attacker moments later. Within minutes, multiple German tanks burned across the hillside. The pattern repeated throughout the battle. Hellcats used speed not just to escape but to reposition into flanking angles, faster than German turrets could traverse. Panthers required manual turret rotation systems that struggled to track targets moving at 40 miles per hour across broken terrain. By the time one gun aligned, another Hellcat was already firing from a different vector. Shoot, relocate, reappear. American crews exploited terrain folds, hedgerows, and road curves to create overlapping ambush zones. Some even learned to fire into the narrow gap between a Panther's mantlet and hull, ricocheting rounds downward into crew compartments when frontal penetration was impossible. German armor was not failing mechanically. It was being tactically outpaced. At Arracourt, steel thickness meant nothing if the gun could not acquire the target tan the Hellcat was becoming. The hardest target on the battlefield to acquire at all. The Ardennes was supposed to crush them. In December 1944, Hitler launched his last great gamble, massive panzer formations punching through the frozen forests of Belgium toward Antwerp. Snow replaced fog. Ice hardened the roads. Visibility improved. By every technical measure, this was terrain better suited for German armor than the mist of Lorraine. But speed still moved faster than steel. When the offensive erupted, the 705th Tank Destroyer Battalion was positioned miles north of the breakthrough. Orders came. Fast engines roared to life. M18 Hellcats tore down icy roads at speeds few tracked vehicles could survive, racing toward Bastogne before German spearheads could seal the crossroads. That movement alone changed the battle. At Neuville, for Hellcats arrived just ahead of advancing elements of the 2nd Panzer Division. They slid into firing positions beside paratroopers of the 101st Airborne. German tanks advanced confidently, unaware that their timetable had already been disrupted. The first engagement was violent and close. A Panther appeared at the edge of the village street. An M18 fired from behind a stone wall, then instantly reversed, engine screaming. Relocating before return fire struck. Another Hellcat appeared from a different angle seconds later, punching a round into exposed side armor. German crews swung turrets frantically, but the targets would not stay fixed. Each time a Panzer aligned its gun, the Hellcat had already moved. The M18's automatic transmission allowed rapid acceleration without complicated gear shifts. Drivers slammed throttles forward, pivoted through narrow streets, cut across open fields, and reappeared where German commanders did not expect armor to be. Heavy Panthers and Panzer IVs, weighing nearly twice as much, struggled to match that agility on icy terrain. The effect was psychological as much as tactical. German officers reported facing what seemed like a larger armored force than actually existed. The Hellcat's constant repositioning created overlapping kill zones. One vehicle would draw attention and fire. As German turrets rotated toward the threat, another Hellcat would strike the now exposed flank. During the siege of Bastogne, this pattern repeated under artillery barrages and bitter cold. On Christmas Day, when German armor attempted to break through near Arracourt, coordinated fire from Hellcats and Shermans destroyed nearly the entire attacking formation. The Hellcat did not win by standing its ground. It won by refusing to be where the enemy expected. In the frozen forests of the Ardennes, German panzers finally understood the problem. They were fighting something that would not hold still long enough to be destroyed. After the war, the verdict seemed brutal. The tank destroyer branch was dissolved. The doctrine that created the M18 Hellcat was labeled flawed. Post-war boards concluded that specialized anti-tank units were rarely used the way their architects had imagined. Tanks, not lightly armored hunters, would define the future of armored warfare. On paper, it looked like failure, and yet the battlefield numbers refused to disappear. Across Europe, Hellcat units claimed hundreds of enemy armored vehicles destroyed. Their overall kill-to-loss ratio stood higher than that of any American tank of the war. At Arracourt, at Bastogne, and countless smaller engagements lost to memory, crews and vehicles that could not survive a single direct hit consistently outperformed heavier, better protected machines. The reason was not magic steel. It was tempo. German doctrine revolved around deliberate engagement. Acquire the target, estimate range, fire with precision, adjust. The Panther and Tiger were built for control and dominance. But the Hellcat introduced something corrosive to the system: constant movement. It accelerated faster, it repositioned quicker. It withdrew before correction fire landed. It forced German gunners to track instead of aim, to react instead of dictate. Every second spent traversing a turret was a second closer to destruction. The Hellcat was hard to hit because it denied stability. Even when doctrine failed at the institutional level, the machine's core idea, speed as protection, remained lethal in the hands of disciplined crews. When used aggressively, when commanders embraced shoot-and-scoot tactics instead of static defense, the Hellcat transformed its greatest weakness into an operational advantage. German miscalculation was not about thickness of armor. It was about imagination. They looked at half-inch steel and saw a death trap. They saw an open turret and assumed vulnerability. They saw lightweight and assumed fragility. What they did not see was a vehicle designed to avoid the engagement they were prepared to win. Wars are not won by the heaviest weapon alone. They are won by the force that adapts faster than its opponent. The M18 Hellcat was never meant to outgun a Panther head-on. It was meant to outthink it. And in the fog of Lorraine and the snow of Bastogne, it did exactly that, leaving some of the most feared tanks of the Second World War burning, their guns still searching for a target that had already disappeared.